And welcome back to CentralCoastRadio.com. Well, some of you may have heard a review that I did a few weeks ago for a film called Streets of Colour, a film that I thought was one of the most powerful films we've had come out here in Australia for quite a while. Well, because there are some more screenings that have been announced for this amazing film, we thought we would actually get the director on the phone today to chat a little bit about this absolutely amazing film. Welcome to the program, Ronnie.
Dave, thank you so much, and what a great intro.
No worries, mate. Now, like I said, this is an amazing film. For me, it goes back to films like Every Night here in Australia when we were making such powerful cinema. Tell us a little bit about where the idea first came about for you for Streets of Colour.
Well, for me, it's always been a passion. Filmmaking and storytelling as a kid was something that I always did with, my dad's old video camera and that sort of thing. So I always knew as a kid, and when I became like a teenager, that I always want to tell stories. And growing up in such a culturally rich and diverse area like in Western Sydney, I always thought we had lots of stories that weren't represented in Australian cinema. So I always knew that I wanted to tell stories based on, growing up in the area, and there was always so much rich culture, and there was always a lot of great stories coming out of the area. And I thought, you know what, you don't really see this in Australian cinema that often. So I want to be able to tell our version of, films like, Boys in the Hood or Romper Stomper and all those sorts of things, So that's where, I guess the idea came from.
So you tell us a little bit about those films. You just mentioned a couple of films there, Romper Stomper and Boys in the Hood. Were they the kind of films that were inspiring you when you were growing up?
Oh, look, all films inspire me. I mean, even though I made a street-based sort of movie, I'm inspired by all cinema. I mean, I grew up watching The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and those sorts of films. I love spaghetti westerns. I love The Godfather. I mean, there isn't particularly one genre that I love the most, but just growing up in Western Sydney, we felt like we had our own hood. So we felt like Boys in the Hood spoke to us,
yep,
and to our culture. So growing up and being a filmmaker and hearing, from the best directors in the world, they say, if you're going to make a film or going to write a film, write from what you know. So that's where I started. I started like, let's start from my own loosely basic experiences and go from there.
I was going to actually ask that because that's something that my screenwriting mentor, Ray Mooney, used to say all the time. Write what you know. Don't go out and write about being an AFL footballer if you don't know that world or something like that. So tell us a little bit. Tell us a little bit about the story here in Streets of Colour. Was this kind of written with people in mind that you knew when you were growing up and things like that? Or tell us a little bit about that journey of where this actual screenplay came from.
Yeah, no worries at all. Look, the main character is very loosely based on myself. I did cop a lot of racism growing up. As a kid and a teenager, I used to get bullied a lot and get called all sorts of things for being different and for speaking a different language and all that sort of stuff. So I guess there was a lot of trauma growing up. But it wasn't until, I got older and I realized that it happened again, as an adult. And I thought, all that stuff I put behind me and so sort of it sort of was a catalyst of writing the film. And yeah, a lot of the stuff that you do see in Streets of Colour, they're characters that I grew up with. Some of them I had to amalgamate into one character because, there's similar characters and similar boys that I grew up with and all that sort of stuff. But pretty much, if you to look at most of the characters that I created in Streets of Colour, they sort of existed in some sort of way. And, being a filmmaker, you have that creative, license and that liberty to amp things up. As you know, like most true stories aren't completely true. So, being a filmmaker and being an entertainer, first and foremost, I put a spin on all that sort of stuff, but, I dare to say, like, a lot of it is so authentic and very accurate too.
How did you find that screenwriting process? Because I'm doing a similar thing at the moment where I'm writing a screenplay based on some stuff that happened to me when I was a teenager, and I'm finding it a little bit more difficult than when I would sit down to write a sci-fi or something like that, because I'm writing about events that happened to me and people that I know. How did you find writing the screenplay with that in mind? Did you find it a harder process than normal?
To be honest, you know what? I've written over about 6 or 7 feature film screenplays that I've only ever produced 2 of them, and the rest of it have been shelved over the years, and none of them have been like real depictions of growing up and personal stories. They've always some of them are sci-fi, some of them are crime stories and that sort of thing. This one, because it was so personal, it was very easy to write. I didn't find it hard at all.
Yep.
With the others, I had writer's block, as you probably know yourself. It's sometimes you just stand and you go, okay, what happens next? For this one, I had too many ideas, and those ideas morphed into other ideas, and like I was saying earlier, you have that creative license of amping things up. So I've actually found it quite easy to write the screenplay, but I always wanted to make sure as well that I wasn't putting people that I grew up with in a vulnerable situation too. So. Yeah. There was not a little. There was a lot of care in how I portrayed certain people. So I had to change names and all that sort of stuff. I didn't really use anyone's real name, and like I said, I amalgamated different characters so it wouldn't be so so literal, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah. I guess it wasn't hard at all, to be honest, Dave. It was quite easy.
And what was that like then, going out and casting? Because of course, like you said, the Tez has kind of got a little bit of you in there as well. Did that make the casting process interesting?
Yeah, especially because you want the person depicting you to be the very best, obviously, because they're representing you and your life events or experiences and whatnot. And it's funny how you say it, because Tez is me, but as a screenwriter, I mean, if you look at all the characters, they're all you in some sort of way, aren't they?
Yeah.
Even like the mother character who looks after Tez in the film, she's a little bit me in a weird sort of way. So you sort of inject yourself into all these people, but you give them that different spin, so they have their own sensibilities, if you like.
Yep.
And mixing that with the real life characters that I grew up with, it sort of makes it interesting. But in terms of casting Tez, I've known Rahel Roman for about, I think, 15 years now. I met him at a film course, and I always knew he had something special in terms of his acting, and just a great human being overall. When I was writing this thing, I just saw his face. I knew that he was the man that I was going to place in the lead character. I did open up the casting to see what else was out there, but it's really hard with diverse actors. There's not many Middle Eastern actors that could play this role. I mean, he's not from the same background as myself, but it's quite similar, so it was really easy to sort of cast him in that role. And of course, the best actors can morph into anything that you ask them to do. So he was always going to be Tez. I always knew that, but like I said, I opened it up, and we got a whole bunch of people in. Sorry, not a whole bunch of people. We got some people in. I mean, I pretty much got all the diverse actors across Sydney or Australia, and he just beat all of them out of the water, mate. He was just absolutely brilliant, like I knew he would be. So it was really easy casting him.
Yeah, I was going to ask the second question, follow-up question to that was going to be, how did you cast around him then? Did you do an open casting call, or did you have other actors and actresses in mind for the other roles as well?
Yeah, good question. I spent 12 months on casting because I knew that I wanted the very best. And being an independent film, you don't have the funds to get, the casting agents and whatnot. And so I've always been very good at casting myself. I know great acting. I've been studying it for 25 years. Not acting, but I've been studying the industry for 25 years. And I feel I know as a director what are the best performances. So spending 12 months to get the very best of actors was very crucial to having this film play out the way it did in the performances, because there was because there's such, I can't even get that word. Because there are such strong performances in the film and such powerful and confronting scenes, we needed, everyone to deliver their very best. So, yes, it was an open casting.
Yep.
I used all the casting websites like Star Now and casting networks and all that sort of thing. Excuse me. there was only two other people that I had in mind to cast without really without having to open the casting for it. But I still opened up the casting for everyone. Those other two people were Peter Maple, who I met by chance a few years back, and we connected and networked. And he plays Gaza in the film, who plays the villain character of the film.
Yep.
I'd seen his show reel and I'd seen a bit of his work. And when I was writing Streets of Colour, his face just kept popping in. He had that face, unfortunately, that sort of reminded me about the guys that I grew up with that sort of tormented me.
Yep.
And just knowing that Peter's ability to sort of encapsulate these characters so fantastically well, I got him to audition, and he just blew it out of the water again. I knew that he was going to be the man to do it, so he was cast very early on. The other person was Peter McCallum, who plays Alexander. He's like the mentor character to Tez in the film. I'd worked with Peter McCallum, I think it was one other time, and we'd done other things as well. And I knew that he just had this persona and this vibe about him that just he had to be the mentor character in the film. I could not see anyone else. So apart from those three characters, everything else was an open casting.
Yeah.
And we went through a rigorous process for 12 months. I had hundreds of auditions. We did screen tests. We did callbacks, and then we did chemistry tests, and it got us to the cast that you see today.
Well, it's an absolutely amazing cast, and I guess my other question I wanted to ask as well is it hasn't always been easy to make a film in Australia over the last few years with the pandemic. What was the actual shoot like for the film?
Well, the whole process actually took 7 years, believe it or not. It took me 3 years to write.
Yep.
Shooting itself only took about 30 days over about 2 months, so that wasn't too bad. And we were quite lucky, Dave. We had just finished shooting just when the pandemic was happening. I mean, I remember being on set and people were, whispering things, did you see on the news, there's this thing, it's COVID, whatever. And we didn't know quite what it was at that point, but we were lucky. We just had finished, and then I think the lockdowns happened maybe a few weeks later.
Yep.
So we were able to wrap up everything. The only thing we had to go back and do some pickups on some aerial photography, which wasn't too hard, obviously, to do. I guess we snuck out a little bit, to be honest, to do that stuff when it was quiet.
Yeah. Don't worry, I know a filmmaker here in Melbourne who's shooting a post-apocalyptic film, and he was going out with a drone when Melbourne's streets were empty because it was the best time to film it. So I think lots of filmmakers were doing that. So yeah,
that would have been perfect, right?
Yeah,
that's perfect. Yeah, so we were quite lucky, man. We got everything done, but it was just when COVID hit, obviously that really delayed our post-production. Instead of post-production being, I thought it was going to be a year and a half. It took them almost three and a half years. Because, everyone who was working on the film had to go off and find work and do other things, So being such an independent, low-budget film, it sort of left me with wearing so many hats to finish the film, and that really pushed the film into the 7+ year territory now.
Yeah, well, mate, that 7 years is well worth it because this is an absolutely amazing film. And I guess a lot of our listeners are actually going to be asking now, I know that there's some more screenings coming up, but what's the future for this film? What have you got planned for this film after those last few remaining screenings that are happening?
Yeah, so just over the next month and a half, we've got a bunch of screenings like you've mentioned. And then as of October, I think the first week of October, we release on digital platforms. I'm not sure which ones they are. I've been told like Google Play and Apple and Foxtel and probably Amazon Prime and those sort of channels. So they'll be available for people to rent and buy. And then we're hoping that it'll have a home on Stan possibly.
Okay.
And then, we try to get it out on as many platforms as we can.
That is amazing because I hope a lot of people are able to sit down and watch Streets of Colour. Like I said, this is an absolutely amazing film and we hope that a lot of Australians will be able to watch it. Ronnie, to finish off, what would you like to say to people out there who are about to watch Streets of Colour, whether it be in the special screenings or in the future on VOD? What would you like to say to them? That
they're in for a ride. Bring your tissues because it's actually quite emotional and powerful. And you know, go out and support Aussie local independent films, and tell your friends as well. You know, go out and support it.